Okay, I'm a big baby. I know I'm a big baby. I can cry at just about anything. A commercial, a movie, the videos of a parent coming home after being away, or a son or daughter coming home after being away, or someone reunited with their dog. I know that I am an easy crier. But I thought I would come out in honor of Misery May and share 5 books that made me ugly cry. Hi everyone, I'm Sandy and welcome back to my channel. I do like a good cry, and I like a book that can pull me in enough to make me want to cry. And Misery May, if you're not familiar with it, is an event run by Scott over at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot and Gemma over at Gem of Books. Wonderful event, and I just thought I'd come out and just share some of my favorites. The first one I'm going to talk about is actually more almost around an author, and she has a way of writing women that I connect with and feel an emotional kind of bond with a lot of times. It seems silly to say that I could have an emotional bond with a fictional character, but that is very much a lot of how I feel. And that author is actually Kristin Hannah. And so the women in her stories tend to be very strong, can be very strong, always have something really important going on around them. Like in the Nightingale, a woman in a very difficult circumstance, a historical fiction novel set in World War II, or a story of 2 women who have been lifelong friends and the trials and tribulations that they go through as a long-term friendship in the book, Firefly Lane. But the book that she wrote that made me seriously cry and gave me like this sad bookish hangover for about a week was actually The Four Winds. And so The Four Winds is also a historical fiction book, and it's set in the Great Depression at the time of the big Dust Bowl storms that were going on. And there is a young woman in that book who is so desperately lonely and sad. Her family doesn't give her any kind of support, and she just exudes sadness off of the page. I don't really ever remember her crying, but I remember just this feeling, overwhelming feeling of just depression that just is pressing down on her in this particular story. And she decides to go out and try and find love in some way. There's one particular scene I seem to remember her like getting the door slammed in her face. And it just, again, it struck me as she's trying to find something and doesn't know how to go about it. She seems like she doesn't have all the tools that she really needs to survive in the world. And of course, she gets taken advantage of a little bit by the first person who shows her any kind of attention. And there are consequences for that, not violent consequences, but consequences for that. And so she's trying to maneuver through all of this and trying now to start her family or raise her family with this now husband who is not good to her, not good for her, and just you still want her to be loved. And her daughter, her relationship with her daughter is always so strained. And then they decide that they need to pick up and go to California. So that part of the story is very similar to, say, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, except it has a feminine perspective, where in Grapes of Wrath, it was not that. But it's set in the exact same time period and going on kind of almost the same route to get to California. On the way, lots more issues, lots more problems. But it's always this idea that she is so desperate to be accepted, to be loved, to be wanted in some way. And she never quite gets there. And it just broke my heart for her. Absolutely. The end of it is just rip your heart out and throw it on the ground, kind of sad. And I've thought about her as a character for so long after that. But it's one of those books that I feel like read it with a box of tissues and enjoy it for what it is. But oh man, if you're like me at all and you like, or you have any kind of similar tendencies to like my confidence level and things like that hasn't always been great. And so there was a lot of moments in that book that I personally connected with, but it is an absolute great read. But it is, man, is it sad. Okay, so the second kind of book or topic really is around animals and books. I do like a good book with a great animal in it. It could be something that is truly sad, like Woodrow on the Bench, which I reviewed a couple years ago, I believe now. And I seriously cried because it was about an older dog and the owner's difficulty in letting that dog go. It broke my heart, absolutely broke my heart. It can also be a book like this one, Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls. This is a story of a boy and his two dogs. And, you know, anytime that there's this big desire for these dogs, which Billy has and really wants, and just everything he does is around these dogs. And in the end, it wasn't one thing that happened. It's the second thing that happened. If you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about. That broke my heart. But the book that I'm going to really talk about in the idea of the dog side that makes me cry is actually The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein. This particular book has a golden retriever in it whose name is Enzo, and the story is told from Enzo's perspective. I do like this mechanism that authors can do where they're telling a story from an innocent creature like an animal or a young child, because they can give you, as the reader, so much more awareness. You have so much more awareness of what's going on in these different kinds of scenes. I remember reading this book and reading Enzo's words going, oh, that's bad. And Enzo just doesn't know. He's just like, oh, okay, this should be fine. And just that whole thing. I'm watching this man's life kind of just self-combust or self-destruct as it goes along, and watching Enzo go along with this. Now, what makes Enzo very special is Enzo believes that when he dies, he's going to be turned into a boy. And so the ending of this book is just, it's so full of hope for me and so beautiful that it made me cry for a different reason. Just the end of, Enzo, did he get his wish? Did he get to become a boy? Absolutely gorgeous, lovely writing. If you have a dog or have had a recent loss of a dog, you may need to wait to read it. It is absolutely, truly a wonderful read though. Okay, so the next really kind of theme that I have is around stories that have children. And this one is especially difficult. I am a parent. My son is no longer young though. And the idea of something happening to someone who is so young and innocent, even in a novel, is particularly traumatic. The couple, and it can be something like an instant in a book where in The Kindly Ones by Jonathan Littel, there's this scene with this young child, and it is a story of an SS officer in World War II, and he is horrific. He's a horrible, horrible human being. And I just see this young girl, I think it was a girl, this young child going up because she's scared. She doesn't know what's going on. So she goes to someone that she's supposed to trust or expects to be able to trust or to get help. And the thing that he does is just horrible to her. There was a great thing that I heard Bryan Cranston say. He's like, if you want to impact people emotionally, don't show them crying. Show the person trying to not cry. And that was some of what this was, is that you had this moment of this build up and you just, everything leading up to it. You didn't actually see anything that happened after a certain point, but the lead up to that. Oh my goodness. So the book that I actually really want to share with you is actually this one, The Tin Flute by Gabrielle Roy. So there is a very small component of this book that I want to talk about, and it's with a young boy named Daniel. And so what broke my heart about this particular book is Daniel is sick at parts in this book. And as he's kind of going into the hospital, the part that just really impacted me was that he was alone in the hospital. And that part of it just that loneliness again, and that showing of that loneliness of this poor child in the hospital by himself. This is also a historical fiction novel, and it is absolutely lovely. But his role, that Daniel role, is such a small component of it, but it is so impactful. But I would recommend this particular one. Okay, the next theme, which is the fourth theme, is actually stories of unusual friendships where there is some kind of death involved in the story. And so for this one, I have a couple of ones as examples. It could be like this one, Between Two Kingdoms, where Suleika Jaoud has been diagnosed with leukemia, is in the hospital, and not everyone that is in the ward, the leukemia ward, ends up in remission. And it is tough. That part is hard to read. It could also be a story of an unusual friend friendship like this one, 100 Years of Lenni and Margot, a 17-year-old girl and an 83-year-old woman who become friends also on a cancer ward. And their friendship is so unusual, and I really liked how their characters came about. But the ending of this one as well, when one of the characters dies, is heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking in this particular one. But the book that really showed this for me as one is actually The Collected Regrets of Clover by Mikki Brammer. This book features Clover, who is a death doula. And so her job is to go and sit with people in their last moments, in their last days. And she will write down the last thing that they say. Sometimes it's a regret, sometimes it's a request, sometimes it's nothing really. But so she ends up making friends with this woman who her family doesn't want her to know that she's dying. And she just, through the course of this, really gets to know her and gets to experience a lot of what her life was through her stories. And at the end of that, when the woman ends up passing away, that is the point where that friendship and that bond of friendship that they have, even in that case over a short period of time, was very powerful in that moment. And so I really, that one, I hadn't heard of a death doula before, but it's one of those concepts that I think is just really a really interesting one. And what a tough job that would have to be. A very fulfilling, but very tough job. She's also very sad in that book, Clover, as she's trying to deal with some of the losses in her own life while trying to help others. But it was a very lovely, lovely read. Okay, so the last topic I have is really around a particular topic, and it has to do with aging parents with Alzheimer's. We lost my mother-in-law to Alzheimer's. My father has dementia now, and it is such a hard thing to watch someone go on such a long, slow decline. And when that topic is in books, it can hit me really, really hard. It could be in a book like Still Alice, which has a younger woman who loses her memory very early and what she tries to do to keep it. It could be like in The Man Named Ove by Fredrik Backman, who it wasn't the main character, but a neighbor who had it. And those kinds of things, because of my personal experience with that particular illness, really hits home in a way that is tough. And so the book that I would recommend, or that I said that made me ugly cry, I even tried crying when I first talked about the book, is actually this one, Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi. I have a full review about this particular book as well. It's one of the very first books that I reviewed on my channel. I found it because of Kieran over at Katie Books, and it absolutely has stuck with me. There's a young woman and her mother, and the mother is just awful to her, just horrid through so much of this. And she's trying to do everything she can, but it always seems like there's someone against her, something against her, and she can never do anything right for her mother in this book. And it is so heart-wrenching to see someone go through that on the page, when I have felt so much of what she was going through, because you feel so powerless in those moments, because it does you no good to say something to the person who has the illness, because they won't remember in an hour, in 10 minutes, that something happened. That was our experience with our family members. And so it puts you in this really weird place of, you have this impact of what's going on in the book, and the person who's going through it doesn't even remember. It's one of those things that if you've ever had to go through it, it hits incredibly hard. But this has been one of my favorite books. It's one of the books I've kept for a long time. I don't normally follow the Booker Prize, and this one was the 2020 Booker Prize. This was shortlisted for the 2020 Booker Prize. So very, very good book. If you like that topic, or you want to read about an interesting family dynamic, this one is an amazing one. But yeah, just dealing with everything in it, and dealing with just the memories of going through losing someone to this particular disease hit me really, really hard. So what books have you read? I would love to hear that made you cry or made you want to cry. Like I said, I'm a softie. I'm going to cry very easily, but I'd love to hear your recommendations down in the comments. Please leave me something down there, any recommendation you have. Every once in a while, I want to pick up a book that I know is just going to make me super sad. Please leave me a comment with your recommendations. I would love to hear that. But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, everyone, bye.